Okay, everyone, today we're sitting down with Benita Alexander, and I actually did a YouTube video with her 2 years ago.
Has it been 2 years?
I think so. I
Yeah,
think so.
wow.
Okay, so if you haven't watched that, you should probably watch that one first because it gives a lot of backstory, stuff that we're going to kind of like dig into today. Long story short, if you can even say that, because it is a long story.
I want to hear this.
I know. Also, I would say, in addition to watching my YouTube video, you should also watch the documentary that you produced called He Lied About Everything. Netflix's Bad Surgeon, all of the articles in Vanity Fair where Dr. Paolo Macchiarini was first exposed. Listen, you Google Benita, you Google Paolo, there is like data
Lots
for
out there.
days.
Lots of stuff that's wrong too. But
Well, that's what we're going to talk about
Yeah.
today, because I kind of want to talk about some of the criticism that you've received and also some of the misinterpretation of your story in like major publications. Like we're talking about people.com publishing falsehoods about your story when you have been so open about your story.
Yeah.
There's also Dr. Death. That's all based off of you, your likeness, your story, and yet there's errors in that. So we're going to get to all of it. But before we do, just a very brief backstory. Benita Alexander is an Emmy award-winning journalist whose own life became the story of international headlines when she worked to expose Dr. Paolo Macchiarini years and years ago at this point for basically killing his patients.
Basically, yeah.
Right? I don't even know if it's basically. Some of the comments actually noted that they were happy that I called him a murderer because it really is that dark.
Yep.
So, who is Dr. Paolo Macchiarini? He was dubbed a celebrity surgeon and celebrated for the fact that he had supposedly done the first
Artificial windpipe.
Yes, trachea implant.
Right. We knew it was made of plastic, but he claimed that stem cells were magically, because he was using the patient's own stem cells. That was sort of the mystique.
The thing, right?
And they were supposed to magically integrate into this, what was basically a straw, a plastic tube. And it was at the time when there was all this excitement about stem cells. So it was all this hype, and he was called the super surgeon. But that was the idea, that somehow the stem cells did some magic thing when he bathed this plastic tube in the cells.
Well, but it didn't.
It didn't
and
work.
The only patients who did live actually had that trachea removed, though, correct?
Yeah, 1 patient out of 8 is still alive, and that patient had it taken out.
Right. So it did not work.
It did not work. It was never going to work. Not only that, he skipped every single step along, every single ethical approval, he didn't do any experiments on humans. Everything, literally everything that you're supposed to do before you do something experimental on a human being, and this was experimental.
Yeah.
He just skipped it all.
So. And the craziest thing is all of this happened at the Karolinska Institute, which is one of the most prestigious medical institutions
in the world. That's where they award the Nobel Prize in medicine and something else, I forget now.
So a lot of people just were kind of wooed by him, believed him.
It was like the man walked on water. He was, he was the next great hope for medicine.
Right. And I think that was an exciting thought. So while basically the world was revering him and his work, he was also wooing you in this very, fairy tale-esque relationship and romance. And he proposed and said that the wedding would be officiated by the Pope. And in retrospect, you're like, oh, that sounds crazy. But I just want to remind people in the moment.
There's a whole story behind that,
Right, but his face was also plastered across the New York Times. Like, it was this big thing. So it wouldn't be crazy to think that he could have been the Pope's private doctor, right? And in addition to the Pope officiating the wedding, the Clintons were going to be there, the Obamas were going to be there. It was like this massive guest list.
He claimed he was very well connected, and as a celebrity, an internationally famous celebrity surgeon, doing something pioneering and groundbreaking, that he had connections and all over the world, which those types of people do.
Totally.
And that many of them were his secret private patients, not for the plastic windpipe, but for other things. He was a cardiothoracic surgeon,
right?
In Italy, very powerful, successful one. So that also made sense that he would have visited the Vatican and have access to be the Pope's private doctor. So I totally understand why it sounds completely ludicrous and nuts at first glance, like what? But it wasn't that nuts.
No, but that's why I want to remind people. It's one thing when you know the story now. Yeah. It's a different thing if you were living in that world then. Yeah. And right. Yeah. Okay. So since then, obviously, you have figured out that every single thing, or the majority of things that he was saying to you, were not true.
Luckily, before I married the man. Yeah.
Thank God. Thank God. Well, the Pope didn't marry you, so. But here's the thing. Since then, you have spoken out about deception and victim shaming and speaking truth to power.
Right.
And I think the majority of the responses that you see from people online are very positive. People have empathy for your story for days. But after I was reading the comments on my YouTube channel, because I read them all, I do. I was just kind of a little surprised by some of the criticism. Yeah.
I guess I'm used to it, so.
Well, but then I was thinking, I was like, I'm surprised by this, and I'm curious what Benita thinks about this and what she would respond if she could, right? Because sometimes I feel like people write these comments, send it into the void, don't realize that the people who are living and breathing that story are reading it.
Yeah.
So I cherry-picked a few from mine in particular that I think kind of covers it. And I just thought it would be nice for you to kind of respond to these people as if they were in the room with us.
Sure.
Okay, here we go. One comment was, it's weird to read these aloud because I love you so much and we've actually become friends.
Yeah.
So it feels like this is someone else saying this, not me. Move on, lady. You got fooled by that guy big time. You should have seen the red flags. You were blinded by the money, the trips, and the presents.
Yeah, that's a common one. Usually they throw in there that I was a gold digger, which is hilarious. You can ask any of my friends, anyone that knows me and loves me, they all laugh. I'm the furthest thing possible from a gold digger. I mean, most of the people I've dated have had zero money,
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing there is that it's like Monday morning quarterbacking, right? It's very easy when you have the whole story laid out from A to Z with a lot of things missing and some things wrong to look at it and go, oh, how could she be so stupid? How could she not see it? But you're reading it, 10 years down the road. This was in 2015. I was supposed to marry him when we have all the information, and it just didn't work that way. I didn't have all the information. Also, people go, well, why didn't you Google him? Well, obviously, if you Google him now, all this stuff comes up.
Right.
But if you Googled him when I was with him, what would come up was a polar opposite.
Totally.
This is a celebrity surgeon. He's doing something nobody else in the world has done before. He's pioneering. He was so revered. And there were rumors that he was going to be nominated for the Nobel Prize.
Wow.
I mean, there just wasn't anything negative to find on Google. So, it's sort of like, what red flags?
Totally.
There weren't, and yet I will say, when you wind the tape back, of course, like any relationship that goes wrong or any con artist, you do start seeing little things that might have been clues, but they are incredibly, and I can't emphasize this enough, adept at when you ask them a question. Let's say we're a couple and you're doing something that I think is slightly off, and I did question him. It's not, that's the other thing, it's not like I just blindly
Right.
I mean, the Pope was a whole thing, which it took me forever to believe him on that one, but other things. But when I would question him, he did what a lot of, and I believe he's a sociopath, a lot of them do, is he's rapid fire with the responses, and they gaslight you, come back at you. Why would you ask me that? What are you talking about? I would never do that. I love you, or you're crazy. And they, blah, 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 blah. And they have facts to back it all up, and they're spitting it at you so fast that I call it the fog. You start to retreat physically, and you're like, okay, maybe, it sort of churns your head into this cloudy fog, and you think, okay, I must be wrong. Why would he respond this way? And it's not in a defensive way that you can tell when somebody's just mad because they've been attacked. It's in a very calculated, meticulous way, full of facts and full of answers. And you start thinking, oh, okay, I must be wrong. He wouldn't possibly lie to me.
Right.
And
well, especially when the facts come so quickly.
Yes.
It's not like he's sitting there stammering, being like, well,
No.
he was being like, well, of course I know the Pope. I am his, exactly.
Yeah, very calm.
And so then it makes you kind of feel bad for having questions and doubting the relationship.
For instance, when I first questioned him, about it was something regarding the wedding and why I couldn't get any information. I called one of the first things I did. He claimed he had rented this big castle for all of our guests to stay in, and he was paying for everybody to stay in his castle. And I mean, he sat in front of groups of 20 people at dinner with a microphone and telling everybody how much, he loved my friends and how family and how happy he was to do this for everybody. But one of the first things I did when I figured out that he was lying was I called this castle in Italy, and they told me they'd never heard of him. They didn't know anything about our wedding. And I call him immediately, and it's just very calm. My love, of course they can't say anything to you. Think about it. We have all these top world celebrities coming, and they don't know who you are. You're calling from the U.S. You say you're Benita. You could be anybody, and they're under strict instructions not to say a word to anybody. They've signed agreements. That's what they have to say. Okay.
Totally.
Sounds totally plausible.
But
right?
I would just ask anyone, like, if your partner is saying that to you, I feel like everybody would be susceptible to that.
Well, that's the other thing, right?
Or could be, like, if you're really deeply in love with somebody.
Well, that's the thing I think people forget. When you're in love, especially somebody that you ostensibly are spending the rest of your life with, and who has showered you with generosity and love and warmth, who your friends love, who your family loves. One of the basic premises of true love is you inherently trust the person that you're with. So when you're in it, you're not in detective mode.
No.
You're not looking for things that are wrong because you're in love.
Yeah.
And you assume that the person that you're in love with that loves you is not lying to you.
Yeah, of course.
Trust is sort of an inherently necessary thing in a relationship. So it's easy from the outside to go, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you see this? Most of us just don't do that when we're in a relationship. If we all walked around being, incredibly skeptical all the time, it would be a problem. And of course, there are times when you need to be that way in a relationship, but everything was blissfully perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I think something else that stuck with me when I read that is the first part where it's like, move on, lady. And I'm sure, sir, whoever said that you don't realize how it's coming across, but like this traumatic thing happened to you. So to me, I see a person who went through trauma and is talking about it to share experience, to shed light on what can happen, how people can be deceived, and show other women, hey, I spoke up, not always easy, but you can too. So that's why I took a little issue with move on, lady. It's like, we don't have to move on.
I don't even pay attention to that anymore because, first of all, I spoke up at great personal cost to myself,
Yes.
I did not have to speak up. I could have. The only people that know everything that happened are me and him. I could have stayed quiet, Had I stayed quiet, what I think people forget is my story and my going public with my story played an instrumental role in ultimately bringing him down and finally getting him charged with criminal charges and convicted and now in prison. Had I not spoken up, that may not have happened, And the only reason that I decided to speak up was not because of what he did to me. It's not this bitter crusade, oh, woe is me, you did this to me. Because he was this super surgeon and he had people's lives in his hands. Yes. And I knew if he was lying to me at this extreme, insane level, there was no way he wasn't lying in the medical arena. And I couldn't live with myself if I stayed quiet because that meant people were in danger and people could be dying. So the irony of that is my speaking out had nothing to do with me.
Yes.
I felt an urgency to speak up and wave the flag like, what, this guy is not who we think he is.
Yes.
And that was before there were these whistleblower doctors in Sweden who came forward and, ratted him out medically, but that was before they had come forward. So I didn't know that there were other people out there that knew that.
But also, so you did save lives, or you helped save lives by exposing him, but also the insanity of your story helped draw this attention to the story, right? Like there were those scientists at Karolinska who were like or doctors actively doing research to try and like show how bad he was, right? But it was your story, like the total shock value, you can't deny that contributed to the Vanity Fair article, which then everybody read and was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And then it spread like wildfire.
It was the combination of my insane personal story, and the fact that he was lying so outrageously and egregiously in his personal life, and the medical horror. The combination of it just paints this picture of this man who is a pathological liar, which he is. And it was the combination that finally brought the house of cards tumbling down.
And
but
stopped it sooner.
Yeah.
And stopped it sooner. Like, I'm sure eventually people would have, like, caught wind of it, right?
Hopefully.
But it was like, I think this sped it up, which means that people's lives could have been saved.
Correct. So the short answer, I guess, is, okay, if I had stayed quiet, what would have happened? You would prefer that people get hurt, that people die?
Yes.
You know, I did not go public. People can make whatever assumptions they want, but I did not go public, you know, to throw daggers at him, to whine of like, oh, I can't believe this happened to me. It was never
the story.
It just was never about that, you know? So whatever, you know?
Exactly. Okay. Another person was described having empathy for you, but kind of suggested that the reason why you got a mixed reaction from some was because you came across as, quote, very privileged, someone who enjoyed their privilege, and then suggested that if you acknowledged that, maybe people would soften towards you.
Oh, that's interesting. I am hardly privileged. I have not had a privileged life. I come from very humble beginnings. I have worked since I was 14, you know, and I've had a difficult family background. I put myself through college. I mean, and all my friends will attest to that. I am anything but privileged. I have fought, you know, to get where I have gotten career-wise, and I'm a single mother who still struggles, you know, so... Yeah. Sure, when he came along and he was spending money extravagantly on me and taking me on these beautiful trips around the world, yeah, for a minute, it was like a fairy tale, and I felt like a princess. And was it nice? Of course it was. I mean, I don't know anyone that wouldn't, you know, love to be spoiled that way. Yeah. But I was never looking for that, you know, that just sort of fell in my lap, and that was part of what came with him. And yeah, of course I enjoyed it, you know, and I was floating on clouds when it was happening. But that's not who I am. No. And that's not what I was ever looking for. And that's not why I was with him. You know, I mean, I was with him because I fell in love with this man that I thought was very caring and devoted to helping people who had no other hope, you know, and that was incredibly appealing, you know. Right. I thought he was what he claimed to be. I thought he was this super surgeon who wanted to move medicine into the future and help people that, you know, it was incredibly impressive and endearing, you know, it was, you know, you were sort of in awe of him. And I was in awe of him, but not of his money. I could care less about the money. It was the man and what he represented and what I thought he was going to do for patients. I saw him with his patients. It was incredibly touching, you know, the way he'd tear up, he'd hold their hands. I mean, I thought he was somebody completely different from who he turned out to be. And that's what I fell in love with, you know? Yeah. He had this very gentle voice and this very sort of soft presence. And he came across as being incredibly humble and just this nice, quiet person who didn't want attention, and it wasn't doing it for the attention. Complete opposite of what was actually going on. Yeah. But also when I met him, and this is something that gets left out a lot, I was a single mom. My daughter had just lost her father. She was only 9, to brain cancer. And he was so caring with her and so seemingly dedicated to helping this little girl that he didn't know, had no reason to help, helping her through this and helping us through it, both of us through it, and taking care of us. You know, those were the things that I fell in love with that were appealing. The fancy trips and the sort of, and it wasn't always, but the sort of lavish lifestyle was just kind of a
cherry on top.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. But yeah.
Yeah.
Glad we
cared. And I should also add, that's what you see in the videos and the pictures, because that's what's appealing, you know. But you know how many nights we were at home, just me, Paulo, and my daughter, cooking dinner, you know, playing games, you know, we were a normal family, you know, we really were.
Yeah. Okay. And then the last comment that I want to talk about before I want to ask you if there's any comments that like upset you, but one of the last comments is she helped normalize him. She went against every journalistic standard. She should not be forgiven.
Wow.
Oof, I was like, I don't know. I do things wrong in my life, and I hope that I am forgiven. Like we all do wrong things,
Yeah, we
right?
do.
And I feel like you've
We're all human. We all
acknowledged
make mistakes,
that
myself
was
included.
right.
I think, yeah, the one that really gets under my skin, if there's one, is this notion that I somehow contributed to what he was doing with his patients, or I'm somehow partly responsible for harming his patients, which is just absolutely ludicrous and appalling. When I met him, and I've always been really open and public about this. I did cross this sort of, invisible line that we have in journalism, that you're not supposed to get involved with the subject of a story for a very good reason, right? Because if I'm doing a story about you and we become friends while I'm doing the story about you, my objectivity could go out the window. Maybe I'm not going to scrutinize you the way I would. And that's a very valid reason. Unfortunately, because I did meet him when we were doing a story about, not specifically about him, but about one of his patients, this beautiful little Korean toddler, which was one of the reasons I sort of fell for him, because he was so sweet with this little girl. But I was in a very vulnerable state, and this is something I talk about all the time. Here I am, a single mom who has a daughter who just lost her dad. Our whole world has been turned upside down. I'm facing this future where I know this is going to have a drastic effect on her. She was daddy's little girl. And that's when he pounced, and that's what they do. They look for vulnerable people, and and so I agonized for so long when he was sort of pursuing me. I said, we can't get involved until after the story airs. I'm not allowed. And it's a journalistic line that, like if it's here, a line in the sand that I would never have crossed. But part of the manipulation was he convinced me, they sort of wear you down. So yes, that was my, falling. I crossed this invisible journalistic line and got involved with him before the story was finished. It was almost finished. At the time, even when the story aired, which was in 2014, none of the stuff that we know now had come out yet. The whistleblowers had not yet come forward with their allegations at Karolinska. So, there were some rumblings about some things that he was doing, but nothing real super serious, just that he wouldn't stick around after his surgeries, that kind of thing. So we didn't know what we know now. It's not like I covered something up. It's not like I didn't report something that I knew. We reported what we knew at the time, and we did have somebody in there
fact checking, and
not only many people fact checking, but also criticizing him, saying that it was for being this sort of surgeon who flies around the world and operates and doesn't stick around. But nobody, and we talked to plenty of people that I did even personally that had been in the operating room with him, and people were just captivated by him and his surgical skills. There was no inkling yet of any of the stuff that he, we would later find out. So I don't see how it just doesn't make sense. I mean, it's like somebody's taking the timeline and squishing it. But even then, I was not complicit, with him. I was not helping him in any way. I was not reporting something that I knew. If I'd known, my God, I would have screamed it from the rooftops. It would have been a completely different thing, but we didn't know.
Do you ever feel like, I know that no one is writing these comments with the intention of victim shaming, but does that come up in your mind as something that's happening? Right. And it's interesting because you read these comments, and then I was doing a lot of research about it because I was really curious, like how this happens, why this happens.
The victim shaming?
Yeah. And there's like this, and you probably know this, maybe everybody else knows it. I didn't know it, but there's the very well studied phenomenon called the just world hypothesis.
I don't know this one.
Okay, it's very fascinating, and I want to make sure that I'm stating this correctly, but basically the idea is people are more likely to assume that bad things happen for a reason and that victims have done something to deserve it.
Yeah.
And the reason why is like people blame the victims as a way to preserve their belief that we do live in a just, fair world.
Okay.
So that any injustice occurs only if you've done something to deserve it, right? So, like, you must have done something to bring this
Right.
upon yourself, and it helps other people preserve this idea that we're living in
Yeah,
this
I've
just,
heard
fair world.
variations of that. I haven't heard it called that before.
And I thought that was fascinating.
It is.
Right? Like, nobody wants to think that they could be bamboozled by somebody like that. They
Correct.
would like to think that they would have seen the red flags.
Yes. To me, there are two things. First of all, the finger is automatically, instantly pointed at the woman. I mean, this doesn't only happen to women, but when a woman is conned, or duped by a man, whether it's for money or whatever, the finger's automatically pointed at her. She was a gold digger. What did she do? She must have done something wrong. It just happens. They don't even read the details of the story. The other thing, though, is, okay, look at the story. You have Paulo, even though he's now sitting in a prison cell, convicted of killing his patients. And still, when I read these comments, that's the part that I find most jarring, I don't know, just shocking, actually, is, okay, you're over here pointing the finger at me saying, why didn't she do this? Why didn't she do that? She's a gold digger, whatever. He's sitting in a prison cell. He murdered people, and you're not making comments about him. You're not. I mean, he's the bad guy,
right? Or even if they are making comments about him, just like reserve the comments for really the person who deserves to have that criticism, right? In a real way.
The sad thing, and this is something I talk about all the time now, and one of the reasons I continue to talk about this, the truly sad thing about victim shaming is it is incredibly difficult as a woman to come forward and go public and tell a story that's embarrassing, first of all, to raise your hand and say, hey, guess what? I got duped, he pulled one over on me. And to sort of strip yourself open and air that publicly I can't really describe how painful that is and how difficult it is. No woman does that because she wants attention, because, she's whatever. They do it for the same reasons I do it, because they want to help other women. They want to prevent him from doing it to other people. They're hoping by sharing their story, it will help other people. It's so hard to speak up, right? And it's the reason so many people don't speak up. It's a lot easier to stay quiet, because then you don't have to, face the repercussions of people making negative comments and pointing the finger at you and victim shaming. I could have stayed quiet, right? Nobody was forcing me to speak up. That was my choice. And that makes me sad, because what happens if women don't speak up is they get away with it. Nothing changes. It continues. It perpetuates. And these guys, these con artists, whatever they're doing, whether it's romance scams, online romance scams, and they're taking money from women online, whatever their motive is for scamming someone, if nobody speaks up, it continues. They get away with it, and they count on that. They know that women, especially vulnerable women, are going to be too afraid to speak up. The price is too high, and sometimes there are reasons women can't speak up. Children are involved, whatever. But for the women who can, the women who are brave enough to step forward and say, you know what, hey, this really embarrassing thing happened to me, I'm going to tell you about it, for you to knock them down, and infuriates me, because these women should be, and I'm not talking about myself now, but these women are brave. It's hard,
but
and
you
they
are
should
brave.
be.
Yes,
Thank you.
You are.
Thank you. But it should be applauded. We should be embracing them. Nothing changes if people don't speak up. So, why the hell are you victim shaming? Why are you pointing the finger at the woman? She's trying to do something helpful.
Yes.
She's trying to do something good.
Yes, and it's very hard to do that. So we should be celebrating that strength. I wanted to say, though, that what's interesting to me about that is that if somebody is sitting here hearing you share your story, it's hard to imagine how anyone could create those ideas and that criticism, because I feel like you are so genuine, so honest, take accountability for places that maybe you could have done better in the journalistic whatever. But part of me wonders if it's because of the misrepresentation of your stories in other outlets that these people might be coming into it with that. So that kind of leads me to this next idea, where you are very vocal about your story, but then because it is such a fascinating story. Major publications have talked about it, are still talking about it. There was a recent article in people.com, Dr. Death is all based on Benita, and there's a lot of misrepresentation about your
Yeah.
story. And I would just imagine that's hard. Like, I want to start with people and talk about some of the things that were written that aren't true and how that could be damaging and add kind of fuel to a fire that does it's not true, right?
Right. And I would preface that, I guess, by saying, and I understand it, people will read one thing, right?
Right.
They'll read one short article. They're not getting the full context of the story. It's impossible. Or of me. And I guess I do understand why, we make snap judgments about people. If you don't know me, and interviews are edited and you only see a couple of quotes from me, yeah, people are going to draw their own conclusions. And that's why sometimes I don't take offense, because it's like, I know who I am. My friends and family know who I am. You don't, my daughter knows who I am.
Yeah.
You don't know me,
Yes.
And some of it's laughable in that sense, because it's some of what they say is so polar opposite to who I actually am that it's kind of funny. But that is also one of the problems. People just read a snippet here, a snippet there, and they don't take the time. And when a mistake is made, and this is what we're talking about, what really burns me is that it just gets reprinted and reprinted.
It does.
Nobody calls me, nobody emails,
Well,
nobody checks anything. It's just like it's written in this publication, therefore it must be true, right?
Right.
And then it takes on a whole life of its own. And I know celebrities deal with this all the time. It's just the amount of false information that's out there and the amount of misinformation out there that just keeps perpetuating and has, grows into this thing that has a life of its own is crazy.
Well, I want to talk about that because there are some major things in that people.com article that are factually incorrect. And I wanted to see, like we were talking about it being on the internet forever.
Right.
So before you came today, I just went to ChatGPT and I was like, is there evidence to support that Benita Alexander cheated on her ex-husband with Paulo? And it was like, it comes up and it showed both sides. So it said that there is evidence, and it called up this people.com article. Oh. So I want to read that because I think that that's really difficult. So it says in this people.com article, it says, according to Alexander, she fell madly in love with Macchiarini thanks to his generous spending on trips and gifts, as well as his compassion for her as she coped with her then husband's brain cancer diagnosis.
The narrative is that I was still married to John, the father of our daughter, while he was fighting brain cancer, and that I met Paulo during this time, and I was cheating on this man who's dying with brain cancer.
Yes.
And while I met Paulo, which is insane. We had been divorced at that point for 3 years and, hadn't lived together that entire time. He had moved on, I had moved on, there were other people. And this idea that just infuriates me. And it infuriates me on so many levels,
So what do you think, though? Do you think that this is because of clickbait culture? Do you think it's lazy journalism? What do you attribute such an egregious mistake? Because you have been so open.
All of it. I mean...
If somebody called you and took the time to call you, they would find out that that wasn't the truth.
Correct.
So, what do you do? How do you correct something like that?
You can't, I've learned, and
Really?
I'm sure, I'm nobody compared to, celebrities that deal with this nonsense all the time. You just, unless it's really egregious, and I think that's why you only see celebrities going after people.
Right.
When it's really, really bad, you can't do anything about it. I've called, I've written publications,
and they don't fix it.
Nothing changes. Nothing happens. And
I would feel so bad if I was a journalist and I got something so wrong.
Right?
Somebody commented on a YouTube video I did a couple days ago and was like, oh, this isn't whatever. And I said, I'm so sorry if I misspoke. I want to clarify.
Right.
I was actually talking about this, not that. But I felt horrendous.
Right. Well...
And I had just misspoken. I hadn't even said something like that.
I think it is lazy journalism. I've had this conversation a few times in recent weeks about what I perceive, it's not true across the board, as the change in journalism. When I got into journalism years ago, it was because I loved telling stories and I wanted to tell people stories and I wanted to make a difference in the world, maybe that was, somewhat naive, but it was
No.
pure. And there was also a very, very distinct line at the time between news, journalism, and entertainment. That line is now completely intertwined and blurred, right? And you did not report anything without fact checking, like crazy. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of that has just gone out the window. Now, what people do, a lot of these articles that get reprinted, they just search the internet for other articles and they write their entire article based on what's been published before in other articles. They never pick up the phone once to make a phone call. They never fact check anything. So how do you fight against that? They're relying on what's already out there without doing any of their own. That's not journalism even, that's just spitting out, that's like writing a bad paper in college. You're just spitting out stuff without,
right.
You're picking up bits and pieces and putting it together without checking anything.
Well, I think what's crazy about that is I was doing an interview with this man, Randy Taraborelli, the other day, and he's a 20-time New York Times bestselling biographer, and he works and writes about the Kennedys all the time.
Yeah. Okay.
And he talks about the same thing where people repeat the same story over and over again to the point that it becomes calcified as truth.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. It's much more difficult if a person is no longer living. You kind of have to depend on stories that have been written. But in your case,
I'm right
alive
here.
and well and willing to speak. So I'm like, where's the confusion? Which I want to talk about now, the mixing of like entertainment and journalism. Because in Dr. Death, right, this is a fictional narrative, but it's your name is used, your likeness is used, the majority of the plot lines in your story are used, and nobody reached out from that production to talk to you?
Well, what happened with Dr. Death, I did the Dr. Death podcast by Wondery, which I willingly participated in.
Yeah.
I forget when that was now, maybe 21 or something like that. It was, and the reporter that I worked with and the hosts were incredible, And
I love Wondery.
They did an amazing job with the podcast. It was hours and hours and hours of recordings. And I actually covered the trial, his first trial in Sweden for Dr. Death. And there were some update episodes with me covering the trial. But then so that's all factually based, right? And that's me, the doctors, lots of other people they interviewed talking, and they were amazing. They checked that thing 9 ways to Sunday. Yeah. But then the TV version of Dr. Death is fictionalized, So I think mine was the third season of the Dr. Death podcast. The first season had already been turned into a TV series. So they have creative liberty because it's a drama. It's fictionalized. So they can take creative liberties. But what's difficult about that is they're still using my real name. And it's based on my story, but there are many things within that fictionalized TV version, the Peacock version of the Dr. Death story, that are not what happened at all. And so I think, and I've had people, even people close to me, confused, called me, wait, that didn't happen like that. I'm like, nope, it didn't. They just took creative liberties. But when a story is very public, or when a person is very public, it becomes part of
public domain or something?
Basically, yeah. You sort of lose the rights to your own story because it's now part of the public arena. It's been told, my story's been told so many times, it's out there in the public. And you can also argue that telling my story, there's a benefit to telling my story, which is more his story, because he harmed people, because people were hurt. There's a benefit in exposing him and telling the story. It was difficult to watch because they did use my own name. They changed my daughter's name, thank goodness. But, there were things in there that, I laughed out loud.
What were some things that you watched that you were like, oh my God? Also, I just want to say too, your story and what happened feels dramatic enough without the changing of things. You know what I mean? What do we have to embellish? The story is pretty cuckoo, the man was, is not
There are a couple things. I think I think overall they did a really good job, and they did a really good job in exposing the medical atrocity of it, and that it should be the focus. And there was one part of it that focuses on the Turkish girl that was operated on, 250 times or some crazy number like that. And it was just awful what happened to her, Yashim. And they that episode I thought was incredibly powerful and very, very well done. And I do applaud them for that. So, and the things that they got wrong about my story, you know, they bothered me. I don't know if they were so egregious that, it's worth making a huge fuss about. But one of them was in Barcelona when I was investigating him.
Yeah.
And I went to his house in Barcelona where I found a third, was that the third or fourth? Third family that he was hiding in the house where we were supposed to be moving after I married him. He was hiding a whole family.
Yeah.
And the scene is somewhat accurate in that I went to his house, but in the Dr. Death version of it, Mandy Moore, who plays me, breaks into his house. I'm like, oh, now I'm breaking and entering.
I know. I was going to say that makes you sound like a criminal.
Yeah.
Like,
and, I'm like, interesting. And the thing that
to be honest, I feel like the story in and of itself that you have actual documentation of is really dramatic.
But also afterwards, when in real life, when it happened, and when I find he had another family in the house, I'm in the car. Just it's gut wrenching to watch. I'm heaving, sobbing. I'm breaking down. It was a moment where I just completely fell apart and lost it. In the Dr. Death version, they have her going to the sea, because this is in Barcelona, and like diving into the sea and screaming underwater or something, which I'm like, okay.
Like, well, yeah.
Yeah. I know there were a lot of things that I guess the bottom line is you have to remember that when you're watching something that's a drama and is based on real events, and it is fictionalized, so it is not the real story. But I think with my story that becomes difficult because there are so many versions of my story out there. I've told my story so many times that's confusing.
Yes.
You're like, well, that's not what I saw over here, and what happened over here. And
I mean,
there are a lot of other things. There were some things in there that I only watched it once. I could only stomach it once, but there were some things in there that infuriated my family.
Yeah.
Particularly involving my daughter. Things that just never happened and never would have happened, and that was disturbing to me.
Well, it's hard when children are involved and become kind of wrapped up in that without wanting to be or being a willing
and that
participant.
bothered me more than anything else, because that's I don't even want to get started. That's beyond disrespectful to her, and she deserves her privacy and everything else. And yeah.
I guess I am just more than anything. It's like maybe they didn't do anything so egregious, right? But I guess I'm just more surprised that they wouldn't want you as a consultant on the show,
I don't know.
But yeah, I guess.
Choice, yeah.
But I do think that people.com, we need to fix that.
They did. I will say they did have a line in there that was. It was after the, whatever they called it in the show, I can't remember now, after the equivalent of Vanity Fair came out, and the doctors in Sweden which did actually happen. Nobody knew who I was. I didn't know about them. They didn't know about me. And when the article came out, they have some version of it, I may not be getting this entirely correct, where they're reading the equivalent of Vanity Fair and basically saying, like, who the hell is Benita Alexander? And, but in a good way, and they did portray me accurately as somebody that had a very vital role in exposing him.
Yes. Okay. So, well, that's good.
No, I can't fault them. They did a good job overall. It's just frustrating to have personal details not accurately represented, but that's also show business, I guess.
Yes. No, that makes sense. Okay. Before we finish, though, can you talk about what you're doing now? Because I feel like you're always up to something new, and your podcast is booming. So can you tell me what's happening? Like, how are you feeling in the world now? Because it was 10 years ago, right?
Yeah,
this summer.
Crazy. Yeah.
Like 10 years ago that it would have been. Wow.
Yeah, a whole decade.
Is that wild?
It is wild. Yeah.
Because obviously, like, that story, like, he is currently in jail.
He is. He's been behind bars for about a year. If he serves his full 30-month sentence, which is nothing, he would be out in March of 27. I mean, most people don't usually serve their entire sentence, so I don't know. He's in a prison in Spain.
Are any of, like, the other women in families, like, do you talk to any of them, or any of them still, like, with him in any way?
I don't know. I honestly, it's funny, people ask me about his personal life all the time.
And you're like, I don't know.
What happened to this woman? I don't really care.
Yeah. I mean, I just didn't know if that would, like, bring you close to those women, if there was, like, a shared bond.
Look, if they reached out to me and they wanted to talk to me, I would gladly do so. But I'm not going to go and hunt them down or pursue them to what end?
Yeah,
to what
for why, yeah.
You know, there's one woman who's in the Netflix special who spoke for the first time publicly.
That was a big deal, yeah.
In the Netflix special, who had a child with him in the middle of our relationship. And I first found out about her right after the Vanity Fair article came out in 2016. And we had communicated a little bit over text and whatnot. We've never met in person. But she's the only one I've spoken to.
Was that healing, or did it feel like, was it
Yeah,
helpful, or is it
a little
actually...
bit. I mean, we sort of commiserated a little bit, but it's also a little awkward over text. I would actually like to meet her in person sometime. And I really feel for her because she has a child with him, you know, and so you're permanently sort of attached to this man, and I'm not, thank goodness. The others, I just hope for their own sakes that they're happy, and that they're away from him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really all I hope.
Yeah. All right, tell me about you. Tell me about the work that you're doing, the podcast.
Yeah, so I have this YouTube podcast, like you do. It's called Benita and the Baracas. It's under my name. It's at Benita Alexa. And on the podcast, the first couple of episodes, I sort of rehash my own story. But the purpose is to interview other women who've been through something similar to me, who've been lied to egregiously by somebody and betrayed by somebody that they loved, you know. And I'm not just talking routine, not that there's anything good about cheating and having affairs, but this is about people that enter relationships with, you know, nefarious intentions, and they're manipulative, they're sociopaths, they're lying egregiously, they have many other relationships going on at the same time. It goes on for years, or whatever it is. And so I interview these women, and the whole purpose of this is to give women a platform, a place where they can talk about this safely, with somebody like me who gets it, right, who's been through it, who can empathize, to educate people about things like victim shaming and, you know, red flags to look out for, all the things. And hopefully to educate other people, like some of the people that are writing these comments, to understand what a woman goes through when she gets caught up with a person who at a minimum is a pathological liar. But I think what also gets forgotten a lot is that these people many of them are sociopaths, and they're not well, and they're gaslighting, and this is not just normal relationship. Oh, you know, this guy, you know, effed her over. It's not like that at all. And so the hope is to encourage people, empower people, educate people, and have people learn. I wish I could do more to stop victim shaming and to prevent any woman from going through that. And
I think it's like anything else, though. The more that we talk about it, and the more that we show that these comments and the people who are commenting aren't intending to do that. I don't think that people realize what's happening. I think it's kind of so ingrained in us psychologically. But I think like calling it out and showing people that maybe this is kind of what's happening is helpful.
Yeah, I mean, there'll always be, and I always tell women that before I do an interview with them, there will always be haters.
Yeah.
There will always be those people sitting, you know, anonymously behind the keyboard in their basement or whatever, that get off somehow and saying snarky things to people.
Yeah.
Those people are never going to go away.
Yeah.
You know, but there's also a certain amount of ignorance, people that just don't know, that just maybe not by their own fault, that, don't know the whole story, don't, you know. I just wish people would be more supportive overall. And like I said earlier, embrace women, you know, and embrace each other, you know, and be supportive of someone who has the guts and the courage to come forward and talk about something that's difficult. Nobody wants, I promise you, that's one of the things that always makes me laugh. Like, do you really think I would have brought all this on myself?
No.
You know?
Yes.
You know, why would I do that to myself?
No.
Why would anybody do that to themselves?
No.
You know? And there are plenty of times, you know, along the way, and still where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to talk about this anymore. I don't want to subject myself to this vitriol, you know?
Yeah.
But I also know that, and this is important, for all the negative comments, for all the haters, there are far more positive ones.
Yes.
And way more people reaching out to me, thanking me for sharing my story because it helped them in some way, you know, and that number just drastically outweighs, you know, the pool of haters. So I honestly, I laugh a lot at these comments now. I don't really, it's frustrating.
Yes.
You know, the things that keep getting reprinted that are wrong are aggravating.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean.
I'm sure it was more difficult to stomach like the first time around, but it
Oh my
has been a
gosh.
while. So you're used to it by now.
It was brutal.
You know
At
what
the
I mean?
beginning, I mean, I was in tears. I was in tears. And my friends were saying, you know, we're coming over, we're tying your hands behind your back, and we're taking your keyboard away. You can't look, you can't read. And that's also something I have learned to do. I don't read the comments. And there are certain platforms where the comments are particularly brutal, and I won't go there because it's just
why?
And it does nothing positive. I just the other day made that mistake because I was trying to figure something out, and I went on one of these platforms and I started reading the comments, and you know, my jaw was hanging on the ground. I'm like, holy crap, and they're talking about me, you know.
I know, but it's hard when some of the comments are nice and someone's like, I so support you. It's so nice to hear about this. So it's like, I like to read the nice comments, but I wish we could have a filter for the not nice ones.
I ignore them. I don't. and on my own social media, I will just delete them because and sometimes people, oh, she deleted my comment. Well, you know what?
Yeah, then
you come to me. You come to my Instagram, you know, my social media, my TikTok, whatever, and you want to make a negative comment. Sorry, but you're going to risk getting deleted. But go say it somewhere else.
Totally.
Not here. This is my place. You know?
Yeah, 100%. Well, I admire you for telling your story.
Thank you.
Years ago and continuing to like share your story in hopes that like women feel safe and comfortable to come forward.
Yeah, and
I think it's very inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope a lot of women have told me that I've helped them, and that is in spite of all the hostility, the negativity, you know, all the difficulties, that makes it worth it. You know, I mean, aside from him being in prison, which is, you know, and hopefully never hurting anyone else.
Yes.
Knowing that somehow my story touches other women, and somehow by talking about it, I am helping other women. That alone is healing, you know, and that alone sort of helps me get through it. And no, they can say whatever they want. I know I would. That's the crazy thing. With all of that, I would still do it all over again.
I was going to ask that. You would, yeah.
Yeah, because I had to, right? He had to be stopped, you know, and you know, I would brace myself a little better and be better armed.
How could you
for
have
it?
even like anticipated any of that? Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for
This
having
is
me.
so fun. Alfred, thank you. All right, thank you.